Hey everybody, welcome back to Consolidating Power. We're back with our second video in our Eternal Rewards series, today on Gar Saxon ECL. I've got a special guest with me from the often imitated, never duplicated Team Bendu based in London. Kabir, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Lucas. Sorry, consolidating power, I mean. Yeah, as Lucas mentioned, I share, membership of the very exclusive, semi-serious group who all play SWU together in the London area, and we just love Bendu and Grief Karga. But yeah, I've been playing a lot of Gar Saxon, playing a lot of PQs and the Liverpool sector qualifier a while ago. And yeah, thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah, no worries. You played Gar Saxon at the Liverpool sector, didn't you?
I did, and it was an absolute Django fest. But I remember I played yellow back then, so it's a bit different. I'm interested to see how Django does into Gar ECL. Like I played a lot of yellow, and I actually had quite decent success into Django. It was just every other matchup, which was a problem when I ran into it. But yeah, it was very
Yeah,
fun.
absolutely. Well, we're gonna definitely mention Django here because I think Gar is going to be well positioned into the Django Fest Eternal meta, as you call it. So let's get into it. So for those of you who weren't familiar with Gar Saxon in the Premier meta, essentially what he does is all of your upgraded units, including himself when he's deployed, get +1 power. The synergy here is with Energy Conversion Lab, which allows you to give a lot of powerful upgraded units ambush, and seeing as Gar gives them +1 power, they're going to be able to ambush in for all of these important breakpoints. All right, so Kabir, you've played a lot of Gar. Why do you like him? I mean, we have your list here from the end of the Premier rotation cycle, and I just want to get your thoughts on him as a leader and where you ended with him at the end of set six.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the fact he is the prettiest showcase around,
Oh,
probably.
let's go.
The main reason I like Gar is that he changes the maths on a lot of units. So, for example, one of the things I discovered when I first got into him in set two is that obviously if a unit comes in with a shield, it counts as upgraded, right? But the main trade-off for a shielded unit is usually it loses power. However, with Gar, you're gaining that one extra power that you like almost to compensate for the shield. Um, and then I also like he's very flexible. So the ECL version is a lot different than yellow. Yellow is very heavy aggro, but I like that this can play both the blue-green villain, power of the dark side, craving power, overwhelming barrage, clear the board into your aggro matchups, but also whilst you're not as good into control, you can race and go very aggressive with your units. And then into mid range, you're sort of playing that for the board, who can gain the superiority. And I really like that you've got a few tools that the control decks have, but also the aggro style. Hence, yeah, I absolutely love him. And also in Legends of the Force, he got Darth Vader, the six drop Darth Vader, which is the best unit to ECL.
Yeah, one of my favorite cards, absolutely. Well, why don't we take a look at what Gar is getting in Eternal, because we're going to be able to trade out some of these more chaff units for some real bangers coming from set 7. All right, so we have some absolute bomb upgrades for Gar Saxon ECL coming in set 7, but before we get into that, there's some really interesting stuff to talk about Gar as a leader in an Eternal format.
Definitely. I think one of the beauties of Eternal is that you get access to more cards, right? And there are some leaders who do just get inherently better. So for Gar Saxon, who has a static ability that always works with upgraded units, you just get better units with every set as they print more. That obviously weren't necessarily designed for him in a Premier space. I remember when we first started playing Gar back in set two, you had to main deck like Wilderness Fighter and Dr. Evazan and Privateer Sick, these absolute rubbish cards, right? And now you've got access to these bombs right here.
Yeah, those are great points, and let's talk about some of these bombs. I'll save my favorite for last, who is on the right there. But let's take a look at Han Solo here, who's a one-drop, 1/1 shielded that says on attack get an XP. That's already like pretty premium stats. But why does Han go from good to great in Eternal, do we think, or in Gar specifically?
Well, I think that extra power, right, is just incredible. So I think with Gar, there's two things I love about him is that because he's a one drop, and spoiler about the deck we're going to see is that if you're playing, let's say, with Owen Lars, you can open with Han and Owen, but also as well, if he loses his shield, he keeps the power buff because he's given that experience. Which a lot of these units, when they lose their shield, they're just a bit not very good anymore. But I
Uh,
love this with Han, and it just gets bigger and bigger if you're playing into space aggro, for example.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point about him losing the shield, but still keeping the power buff through that, especially on attack. And one thing I'm going to go ahead and point out, which we're going to talk about all three of these cards, is don't be afraid to ECL early in the game. possibly turn one or two, even depending on what your opponent plays. Because think of it in sort of the ping Tarkentown games that try to remove the threat on the board turn one. Gar has lines to do that with, and Han is swinging for three with that possible ambush on turn one. I think you could even timely him if you didn't want to blow your ECL, right?
Yeah, turn one you can timely him, which is incredible. And also, not to again go on to the extra cards here, but one of the problems I found with Secrets of Power with Gar is that everything was a 2/4, so you couldn't really trade in turn one. Whereas cards like Lepi, Han when he starts to get bigger, and of course Lats are incredible to ECL in to kill whatever you want. It's a 3 power, a 3 health unit, 4 health unit, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Lepi here, which is a 4/1 in Gar. If you ECL that turn one, not only is she surviving, but you're wiping any of that possible nonsense that decks are trying to put against you on turn one. Like if we're thinking about Han 2, for example, who's throwing down the Ogdo Bogdo, or an Obi-Wan deck that's trying to cheese you out with the Jedi Consular, you can just destroy all of that turn one ECLing Lepi Lookout. I'm wondering if there's an interesting play pattern here where, as Gar, you want your opponent to start with the initiative, sort of like those Quinlan Tarkentown kind of games.
It's very interesting. I guess yeah, it does depend on the type of matchup. If your Vader's not as powerful in the game, that it could just win you the game on the spot. Maybe into like Grogu was another one, the one you
Yeah,
mentioned there. You
absolutely,
can one shot
absolutely.
Grogu with Leppy, which is ridiculous.
And then Lats Razzie here is like one of my new favorite cards. Absolutely, she's completely broken in Gar because if you're not familiar with her text, she's a 2/1, and you can either choose to give her a shield or an XP, and then she does damage equal to her power to an opponent's unit. So you can choose to give her the shield and do 3 damage, or choose to give her an XP and do 4 damage. And similar idea as the Leppy ECL there, I think.
Yeah, and I think as well you can note is that you can kill probably most leaders in the game. If you give her an XP, you can kill Cad, and I think she would survive. No, she
Oh,
wouldn't
with
survive
ECL because of the
with
trigger.
ECL.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you can kill a Cad if you give her the experience. He's 8 health. That's 4 on attack,
And
4
then
from the
ambush for
power.
four.
And
Yeah,
you can also use timely with her because she's not very expensive. You could on curve, well, for 5 resources, timely from the resource row, ambush her in for 5, kill any leader.
that's absolutely insane. And another reason that we think Gar might be well positioned into leaders like Django, who might be the boogeyman of the format, because many of your units are shielded. You're blocking that first tap down from Django's ping. And here, when they play Django, go ahead and ECL or timely or lats from the row and destroy that Django before he taps down your whole board. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get into our Chancellor's Spice segment here. And coming off of talking about lats, my pick for this deck is Bounty Hunter's Quarry. We often saw a lot of Han 2 ECLs in the late meta of sets 5 and 6 playing Bounty Hunter's Quarry, and I think we can take a similar line here with this sort of aggressive mid-range deck that Gar Saxon is, and play Bounty Hunter's Quarry and ambush stuff into your target. You can even do this turn one with Han Solo, actually, Bounty Hunter's Quarry, whatever they play, ECL out Han, and if he happens to kill it, you could just take over the board so quickly. My target in mind for this is Lats, of course. If, if you can get a board state where you play this on turn one or turn two and then ECL it, kill it, and then play a Lats and kill something else on the ground, I don't see how they can possibly win from there. Did you have any thoughts on Bounty Hunter's Quarry here?
Yeah, so initially when you pitched it to me, I wasn't sold, but then as soon as you mentioned the Lazzarazzi thing, I was like, that's an incredible decision. I didn't even clock that. That is the board presence you can do there is ridiculous, right? Let's say you ECL Evader and something happens to have Bounty Hunter's Quarry, Lats for 4, you can clear 3 units if you get lucky.
Absolutely insane, I think. I mean, yeah, it's what that becomes a 4 for 1, does it? I think it's a 4 for 1 there. Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. Cool. And then for your spice pick, we have something that, well, might not be too spicy. What do you have to say about this card?
Yeah, I do feel incredibly boring with this pick, and I think this might just be my deck building. Is that sometimes the best options are the best, but for me, hot shot when I played this in PQs and stuff, just the one of hot shot out of aspect just won me so many games because hitting with Gar Saxon for 7 is was surprising your opponent with it. It's always a resource. It's one of my favorite cards, and it was one of my biggest regrets was not making main decking 2 of them when I
Yeah.
played in the PQ. Only main deck 1. So again, it's boring, but I think it's great, and of course if you want to, Grief Karga will find you that upgrade just in case.
Yeah, like I'm surprised people haven't been running Grief Karga out of Aspect for 4, right? It's really the synergy here is unreal. All right, so now we have our finalized Gar Saxon ECL Eternal list here. The main thing to keep in mind about Gar Saxon ECL and Eternal is that the strategy of the deck isn't changing, but our early game drops are so much more powerful now. I mean, we have platforms for Overwhelming Barrage to carry us into the late game here that are much more powerful and much more sticky, I think, and able to take over board states than we've ever had before.
Yeah, and I think one thing I want to highlight, as well as the set 7 cards we've added in here, so Han, Lepi, Lats. One thing I know this is Lucas's suggestion was 3 of Nimble Prowess. So I think
Oh,
it's a
true.
card that's pretty important in the meta right now, at least post rotation especially. But I think pre rotation it can be really important. If Django's exhausting your board, for example, you go, okay, here you go, Django. For 1, I'll do the same to you. You know?
Absolutely. When they TDR out the Devastator, you're just like, oh, okay, you've tapped down my board. I'll just put Nimble Prowess on my Inferno 4 and, bounce
Yeah.
that back to your hand. You've sort of wasted these actions and resources. I think keeping up one resource almost at all times against these decks that are going to try and aggro you out or exhaust you, uh, you need to threaten that Nimble Prowess at all times.
And I think that I think that's why we've kept a lot of the early space units in here. And I think you could probably play a lot of the ground units, your secretive sages, etc. The 3/2s on the ground, but giving you that option to just exhaust the space unit if Django starts space, you start space, and you've got the Krennic synergy with the when defeated. We've kept Krennic in here as well. He's never going to disappear because his when defeated synergy is just too good for this deck.
Absolutely. I mean, Krennic lets you, is it play Darth Sion on turn 4? That's
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely nutty. There's some interesting cards in here that you suggested to me, such as the client. What were you thinking with the client there?
So yeah, there's an interesting one, and of course the good thing that you've seen our sideboard. There's so many other suggestions you could put. You can also put that 4/3 shielded card, the Outer Rim Outlaws, I believe, which is what
Yeah,
I played in previous tournaments. But the client for me is a bit better for 2 reasons. Number one, he's sturdy. He's a big health unit, and I think if Quinlan's popping around a lot, if Talzin becomes popular, you've got a lot of these 1 health, 2 health units that Talzin can eat alive. Whereas the client is sturdy. He's hard to kill, and also if you do his action, the healing, overwhelming barrage on something else, you can clear a board and gain 5 health, which is so underrated. And also you can play a
yeah.
little game where you can put, the bounty on a unit and they get paranoid. They might attack with that first. It's not an optimum play, etc.
Yeah, I really like the idea of OBing off of him. Again, these are the sturdy platforms that are hard to kill that we're thinking of here. But also his bounty plus Bounty Hunter's Quarry, I really think we can swing the game in a really nasty sort of way. What about our top end here? Obviously the 3 Vaders, but is Maul too big for the deck?
See, I think this is where you and I have an interesting discussion about this. Is that I'm so pro Maul. I think he's one of the best cards. Like if I could run 3, I would because I think you can surprise people with the damage. You can kill a leader if you're maybe if you just slow down on the board. If Quinlan gets a bit ahead of you, you can then bring Maul out. If they've discarded your Vader, for example, you've got a backup plan. And also, you can just get that little bit of damage over against Tarkin decks like Django. You might be able to just get a little bit extra just to get over the line or kill the leader, surprise him, and ruin his entire turn.
Absolutely. Well, I think that'll have to do it for us, but it was really a pleasure to get to speak with a master of Gar here for the channel because I certainly don't have the experience with him that you do. But you've offered some really good insight here, and I hopefully the viewers will be able to test him out in the future and stay tuned with the deck link in the description below with any changes that we make. So, thanks for being on the channel, Kabir.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah. All right. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.